All right, so for number 6, this is a little bit tricky of a question. It says sociologists, some, so at least one economist holds that unregulated markets should accompany democratic sovereignty because they let people vote with their money. Okay, so this part of the argument is going to be an opinion of others. And we're saying that, hey, so these economists say that unregulated marketplace, so whenever we have an unregulated marketplace, it should be accompanied with a democratic sovereignty because then it allows people to vote with their money. But, so we're going to have a point of contrast here. We say, but this view that we refer to up above ignores the crucial distinction between the private consumer and the public citizen. So we're saying like, hey, your view, like you're not thinking of these things like, hey, the private consumer is very different from the public citizen. In the marketplace, the question is, what do I want? So whenever I'm buying stuff or whenever I'm the private consumer, I'm asking, what do I want? But as a public citizen, at the voting booth, the question is, what do we want? Hence is also a conclusion indicator word. So we say, hence, supporters of political democracy can also support marketplace regulation. So what is our conclusion here? So a lot of people either go with, they think that, but this view ignores the crucial distinction between the private consumer and the public citizen, or they go with after hence. And so while we want to ask ourselves which one is being used to support the other. And so the first one is saying, but this view ignores the crucial distinction between the private consumer and the public citizen. And so why is this important? We go on and we give a little bit of support or of how they're different, but this leads to the fact that supporters of political democracy can also support marketplace regulation. So by making this crucial distinction, our sociologist is saying like, hey, actually you're able to support both. You're able to support political democracy and you also can support marketplace regulation, because if you recognize that there's a distinction between private consumers and what public citizens do. So this is a main conclusion question. So A says, voters think of themselves as members of a community rather than isolated individuals. Well, that's not this last part here, so that can't be our conclusion. B says unregulated markets are incompatible with democratic sovereignty. Well, that would be the opposite of what we're trying to say. We're trying to say that, hey, you can support political democracy and you also can support marketplace regulation. But we're not saying that unregulated markets are for sure incompatible with democratic sovereignty. We're like, you can't just say like, oh, because we're saying that you can have both, that doesn't mean that you can't have either of them either. So that's why B is going to be wrong. C says where there is democratic sovereignty, there should be unregulated marketplaces. Well, once again, we're not saying what there should or should not be. We're just saying like, hey, you can support both of these things. D says private consumers are primarily is very strong, by the way. Private consumers are primarily concerned with their own self-interest. While that must be true, that has nothing to do with the fact that we're able to support both of these things. So by process of elimination, I would end up probably with E. But it says opposition to unregulated marketplaces is consistent with support for democracy. I think this is a very tough, correct answer. I would go with it because I crossed the other ones off. But when we dive into this, so if we are against unregulated markets, what are we for? If we're against unregulated markets, that would mean that we're for regulated markets. So I'm going to go ahead and cross this off. So regulated markets is consistent with support for democracy. This is definitely the closest to our conclusion, which says that supporters of political democracy can also support marketplace regulation. And so our answer is going to be E.